Hey everyone, and welcome back to another video from Aman Talks NRL SuperCoach. Today we're going to go through the hot topics, burning questions and trade targets for round 21. Big caveat though, that is if you do have trades left. I'm sitting on 3. Let me know in the comments below how many you're sitting on, if any. We've come to a period where there's injuries, suspensions, and we really are relying on our depth in our teams, but let's get ahead for the round preview. Quickly, just wanted to take a look at how I'm actually tracking along rank-wise. So I scored 1,165, only went up by about 50 spots, so a pretty small green arrow, if you can even call it that. But that is now, I think, 10 weeks in a row with the green arrow, which is nice. Sitting at 2,350, I want to try to get as high as I possibly can. Top 1,000's probably maybe a little bit of a stretch, so I'm hoping to maybe, if I can crack top 1,500, I'll be happy enough with that. Still got 3 trades, thankfully, so I can deal with that Nathan Cleary size issue in our teams, but I'll get into what I'm looking to do with my team later on in the video. Quick shout out as well for David of Turbo or Die, who scored 1,415, so topped round 20, and shout out to our top 10, Alex topping the overall group league, sitting in 10th spot, which is amazing. And we've got guys like Shane in the top 15, Toby sitting in 19th, and a lot of other guys sitting inside the top 50 and top 100, so all absolutely killing it. So hopefully you can make a big push for the run home if you do have some trades left. And final shout out as well to all of our members. I won't read all your names out, but I do really appreciate all of you for showing some support to the channel and all the fun different emojis you can use on the live streams and video comments. But thought it'd be best to start off with the biggest talking point of the week. The best Nathan Cleary replacement. So it's come out obviously that Nathan Cleary is going to be out for 5 games, which is essentially the rest of the SuperCoach regular season, and so we're probably all going to be looking to trade him out, given that he's at a pretty high price tag of 691k. Now I have seen a few people ask, is there actually even any merit in selling him if you've got suitable cover in your halfback position? I don't actually mind it if you can still field a good 17 without having to trade him. I don't mind the play of just holding him, and then you can kind of just next week decide who you want to go for. I think something like that, if you are looking at that approach, I think that's a good approach if you're looking for someone like Cherry Evans. I think Cherry Evans, in my opinion, is probably still the best halfback to go for if you're looking for a direct, gun replacement for Cleary. Now, I'll also just caveat that, probably just to start off with, I think if you don't own someone like Nico Hines, 100% I think he is the best halfback replacement. If you don't own him already, he's got a super draw for the run home. He's a proven gun for this season. Number 2 on my list probably would be Latrell or Tedesco. Now Tedesco's got a slightly tougher matchup against the Broncos, but I do think he's going to have a good run home. Similar with Latrell, he's got the Warriors this week and then Parramatta, who do concede a lot of points to fullbacks, in SuperCoach terms. So I think Hines, maybe just about Latrell, I think he's still got 2 really good matchups, and then probably Tedesco I'd say are the top 3 replacements if you've got the duels obviously, but in this particular side I'll obviously just speak to direct halfback replacements. That's a position that I find myself in. I don't mind the play of waiting a week, because Cherry Evans has got 149 break even, but then he comes to a nice matchup against the Titans. Shark and Raiders is not the easiest, and even the Bulldogs, I've got them highlighted in bright green, but realistically I think we all know that they're probably a better team than that on paper nowadays, just given the form that they've shown. So overall the draw for the Manly Sea Eagles isn't the best. He has had 2 low scores in the last couple of weeks, which is why maybe if you've got the depth, it could be a case where you wait a week before maybe deciding to jump on Cherry Evans, because he will also drop in price a little bit. Keeping in mind that money, Cleary's dropped to 690k, which is still a high price tag, but it's nowhere near what we probably all paid for Cleary. There's only a 50k saving going from him down to Cherry Evans. So Cherry Evans would probably be my number 1 option for the run home if you're looking for a direct halfback replacement. Number 2 behind him probably would be Jerome Hughes, just for the proven nature of him, 68 average for the run home, and just also while I mention averages, the players that you see here from left to right are actually in descending order in terms of average if you're looking at in that perspective. Hughes will be a better buy for this week at 553k with a nice matchup against the Titans. I do think he'll be someone who will be good for this week. Only thing that puts me off him is the draw home is pretty tough. The Panthers, Broncos, Roosters and Eels. We all know the Storm are a classy team, but they really have been struggling the last few weeks. Even against the Warriors, they weren't too convincing. So I still think I would lean with Cherry Evans just over Jerome Hughes. The thing with Cherry Evans is that the bulk of the attack will flow through him, compared to Melbourne, where you still have the likes of Munster and Grant, who can hog the ball away from Hughes. I know Hughes did score well last week, but I do think Cherry Evans is who I'd still lean in out of those 2. Now, if you are looking for alternate options at the halfback spot, I'd say number 3 behind him is probably Adam Reynolds. He's got a 66 average over the season. he does have some good games coming up. Like he's got the Knights in rounds 22, which is Knights is honestly, the Knights and Titans are looking like the two best teams that you can play for the remainder of the season. Then he's got the Dragons, which do concede a lot of points to spine players. There are some tougher games though, Roosters, Storm and the Eels, which does also slightly put me off. I think the message that I'm going to try to say was there's not a lot of standout options at halfback, which is why I'm even leaning another alternative, which is just below Nathan Cleary there, which is the nothing out option. Going really, really cheap. Someone like a Jock Madden, for example, from the Tigers. It looks like he should be playing in the halves for the remainder of the season, but there is obviously a question mark with Luke Brooks could come back into that team at any point, and then he could be enough option, which is not great. I think for now, while he's playing, he's fine. He's depth. He's got even a good matchup this week against the Knights. The problem will be though, if he does end up leaving the team and you've only got one starting halfback, you might be into a bit of a sticky situation there. So I think alternatively, if I would go a little bit cheaper, if you're looking to raise funds, that's where someone like Tom Dearden can come in. Now Dearden's got a 56 average over the season, but if you're paying 425k, I don't mind it freeing up 200k. He can just be someone that you can play on matchup. Hopefully you've got enough depth where you can play like a second row forward, maybe a hooker, maybe a centre wing. You don't have to rely on your second halfback spot, because I think because there's no standout option, I don't mind going a little bit cheaper, going someone like a Tom Dearden, and then banking like 200 plus k, and then say for example that gets you an upgrade to say like a Joe Tarpany, maybe a Cam Murray, maybe a punt on Nanai. I think that combination is really nice, because then you can just play Dearden on matchups, just like any of your other center wings or your second row forwards, because the Cowboys still do have some good matchups against the likes of the Bulldogs this week, still a decent matchup obviously, and then the Warriors in round 23. So I kind of also do think this whole argument about who to go for is kind of team dependent. There's a couple of pod players here I'd mention as well, like Sean O'Sullivan, Jamal Fogarty, and also Ben Hunt. Now, Ben Hunt's got a couple of decent matchups, Titans and West Tigers, but he's very attack reliant. And a 521k, to be honest, I'd rather just take 100k less and go with Tom Dearden for the similar average, and probably would a equal draw on paper as well. And also don't forget the Tigers are playing pretty good, so I don't even think they're necessarily as easy of a matchup. Another option is Fogarty. He's probably got the best draw overall. Apart from Panthers this week, apart from that, you've got Dragons, Knights, and the Tigers. All decent matchups. Even Manly do concede points, and then he's goal kicking, which does help. But still, I think he only scored about 56 points last week against the Titans. So he's not someone that, yes, fine, you can play on matchups, but even on matchup, I don't think he's going to be a consistent guy that you can rely on. Definitely will be a pod, but also not a cheap one. Sean O'Sullivan, I probably won't quite go there. I know he's goal kicking, and he's actually had a 63 average over the season so far, but the draw is not great. You've got games against Raiders, Storm, Rabbitohs, and Cowboys. It's really only that Warriors matchup where you think there's probably a good chance of some points there. And then if you look at someone like Dearden, for comparison, I think I like the fact that he's a lot cheaper, and also got some decent matchups there. Sam Walker, I think, could be an option, goal kicking. He has a very good 5-round average, but the problem with him is that he's now 644k, so you're not even saving a lot of money going from Cleary down to him. And there are some tough matchups. Broncos is probably okay, given that the Roosters are playing at home. Tigers is fine. Storm's tough, obviously, and then the Rabbitohs is also kind of tough too. So Sam Walker, I feel like I'm not super crash hot on going with Sam Walker either. In general, I just don't think there's any great standout options specifically at halfback spot. If I had to rank them, I'd probably say Cherry Evans, Hughes, and Anna Reynolds would be my top 3 in that order. But I think in terms of the way your team's set up, I do like going the cheaper option of like a Tom Dearden, maybe even a punt on like a Jake Averillo, who's I believe a halfback /5'8", or if you're confident in your depth, and you think that someone like Jock Madden will play the remainder of the season, going really cheap down to him, because I think a lot of people were anticipating someone like I think it's Lachlan Miller from the Sharks playing this week, because he would have been a cheap option to downgrade. So I do think people were thinking about that downgrade route, and I do like it. So I'm not completely sold what I'll do for my team. We'll probably get onto a section in a little bit where I look at guys like Joe Tarpany and Nanai. Tarpany, I feel like, is someone I really want to get this week if I can. So whatever halfback I downgrade to that lets me get that money, that's probably someone who I'm going to go for, which is why I'm at the moment actually looking like a bit of a pod in Dearden, who I can just play on matchups, and he's not super expensive at 420k, so it doesn't feel like it's a big punt to be making at that price tag. Now, next up, looking at some 5/8. So obviously guys who are still holding someone like an Ezra Mann, spoken about it the last couple of weeks, but this is where that dual does come really in handy if you can switch around your players. I do think that the 5/8 position has got a lot better options than, directly in the halfback spot. I've got Cody Walker here, but I don't think Cody Walker's realistically a buy. He's probably just someone that if you've got, you probably just have to hold now, just given the fact that we're probably pretty low on trades. There's a few guys who I did want to highlight here. So you've got Dylan Brown, Matt Burton, and Adam Doueihi. So Dylan Brown, I'm a Dylan Brown owner. I was actually very happy with the score that he got last week. Without Mitchell Moses now, you would assume that Dylan Brown's going to take on more of the playmaking responsibilities. Now, I had a quick look back, not at 2021, because 2021 overall was a pretty down year for Dylan Brown. But in 2020, there was about 3 or 4 rounds where Mitchell Moses didn't play. Brown had scores of about 95, 59, and 79. Now, those are good scores, but I also don't think they're anything too different from what he was doing the rest of that season. He was kind of hovering around a 65 average. So I don't think there's any good evidence of Brown overperforming without Mitchell Moses. And the draw still is a little bit tougher. You still got the likes of Manly, Rabbitohs, Broncos and Storm in there. So I think Dylan Brown is a nice safe option that you can bank on, but to me he probably will lack the upside, I think, just based on the draw not being that great in comparison to some other 5/8 options here. Like a Matt Burton, for example, I think will possess slightly higher upside because of the fact that he's goal kicking. Warriors is obviously a good matchup. Cowboys this week is tough. Eels, I still think is a team that you can score points on. And I do think that Mitchell Moses, not being in that team will hurt them. He's been really good for them overall this season. Manly and Sharks are obviously a little bit tougher, but Bulldogs look like they're in a good attacking moment as well. So I still don't mind going for someone like a Matt Burton. I'd probably slightly give the edge to Matt Burton over Dylan Brown if that's kind of a 50-50 that you're looking for. Scott Drinkwater obviously did really well last week after a down week before, so still someone that you can consider with a few good matchups to come. But I think the man that a lot of people have got their eye on this week is Adam Doueihi. Big reason for that is he's now had a score of 84, 120 plus last week. And I think he's got the best matchup this week for sure. The Knights at home, I do think that's a matchup where Adam Doueihi can very easily go 80, 90 plus. I know Jackson Hastings being out does probably hurt things for them, but we saw Adam Doueihi last season, albeit in a struggling Tigers team, he still managed to average really well. So I do think he's one of those guys who can, overperform in an underperforming team, if you want to call it that. But to be fair to the Tigers, they've been really good the last fortnight. So I really like Adam Doueihi as a buy. I think if you're looking for a pod, 100% probably will be the best pod. I like the price as well at 513,000. You can pick him up in your center wing. So, if you've got other duels that can help you be a bit more flexible towards the back end of the season, I like him for that reason too. I just think this week is such a good matchup that if you are looking for a sell for Cleary and you can get a 5/8, I just feel like he's the best one to go for. The fact that he's goal kicking just helps him be a little bit more matchup proof as well. Yes, the Sharks and the Roosters are tough, but Dragons around 24, I think he can do perfectly fine in that. Even the Raiders at home, again, I still think he can do well in that one. So I really do like Doueihi as a 5/8 purchase. Honestly, if I was in a 50-50 between Matt Burton and Doueihi, I'd probably take Doueihi this week, just for the fact that he's got the better matchup, got the pod factor, he's a lot cheaper as well, and I just think he'll be really good for the run home. Now, someone else that is very much a pod would be someone like Matt Moylan. I think I mentioned him briefly last week. He does have the best draw on paper. This is another reason why I think Nicho Hynes will be the standout option for a Cleary replacement. Dragons, Tigers, Manly, Bulldogs, and Knights in the final week of the season. Really, really good matchups. The problem with Matt Moylan is that I just don't really trust him in terms of consistency. He does dip in and out of games. He was scoring quite a few tries though in those easy run of games in the few weeks before. Sharks had a bit of a tough run the last month or so, but prior to that he was doing pretty good. So again, if you're looking for a real pod, the 5-round average of 50 is fine, albeit that is in a tough run of games too. Is at a cheaper price as well. So I think, look, if you're someone who's like, say, pretty comfortable in your head-to-head and you're just looking for an outright pod, then I say Matt Moylan's one to go for. But I think Doueihi with goal kicking, and he's probably a little bit more proven Supercoach-wise, I'd probably just take him. Now, I haven't mentioned Cam Munster at all. Essentially what I think though is if you don't have Munster yet, I'd buy him. He's got the Titans this week. It looks like he's going to be goal kicking as well. So all of that aside, if you don't own Munster, 100% I would be going for him first at 5/8. Just behind him, I think I would still go Adam Doueihi. I'd probably go Burton, probably go Drinkwater just for the draw, and then I'd probably go Dillbags at that point. Not too keen on Moylan, but if you're looking for a real pod, then he's probably the guy that you'd want. Now, I quickly will talk a little bit about fullbacks like Latrell and Tedesco. I kind of mentioned it already. I think outside of all those 5/8s and those halfbacks, I do think Hines, probably Latrell, and then Tedesco are the best three to go for if you're looking for a Cleary replacement. I've put in Val Holmes here just because he also has that centre wing flexibility. I know a few people out there probably are able to get a centre wing by selling Cleary. I think going for Holmes is fine. He's 710,000, which is obviously a premium price to pay, but he's got the good draw. He's scored really well over the last few weeks. Even last week, I think he scored about 89 without any major attacking stats. He assisted one of Drinkwater's tries, so there was about 20 points involved in that. But look, 20 points outside of that, he scored 69 points without really doing much, which is the benefit of the goal kicker. So I do think Val Holmes is still a good purchase. Him and Dewey, I feel like Dewey is a nice pod factor, but I'm kind of also more in that pod mood, just because it's the run home, and if you've got lower trades, you kind of just want to throw things at the wall and see what sticks. But look, I think Val Holmes is still a great option, but look, if you don't own the likes of Teddy or Latrell especially this week, I think against the Warriors, and then even the Eels, which I think will be good for fullback scoring, I still think he's a really good purchase this week, and I'd probably rank him just ahead of the likes of Teddy, but not in front of Nico Hines, so I do think is the number one choice. So I kind of alluded to it earlier, but one of the reasons why I was looking at going a little bit cheaper from Cleary to another cheaper halfback was to create some funds to try to afford one of these big second row forward or front row forwards. So I have to talk about Joe Tarpany. I feel like I've been burnt by not owning him since round 13, basically. A lot of people bought him in round 13 hoping to get some nice cover, and he's just been on an absolute tear. A 5-round average of 87 doesn't even do him justice, because I'm pretty sure he's been averaging about that for longer than 5 rounds. Last week was his first try of the season, it was honestly a shock that he hasn't scored a try yet. So I think he scored about 113 points, and that included a sin bin. He's one of the few guys in that front row forward, if not probably the only guy, him and IPAP, who've got that 100 plus ceiling, and he's someone who can hit it consistently. Like, not owning this guy and watching him is terrifying, because he literally punches out like 70 to 75 points with ease. This is kind of why I'm thinking I might just take a sacrifice in my halfback spot and just try to pay the money for Tarpany, because Tarpany's 698k, yes, it's expensive, but it's only like 50k more than a Cherry Evans. I think Tarpany is realistically going to average about 75 for the run home in pure like base power. Throw on top of that any tries that he gets, and the draw is really good too. Dragons, Knights, Manly, Tigers. You can see maybe two or three tries in there for him, the form he's in. And so I think he's going to be someone who will continue to average an 87 average for the run home. And I don't know if any of those other halfbacks will be able to do that, which is why I'm thinking I might just go really cheap in my second halfback spot and then just, upgrade one of my front row forwards. I know front row forward is a spot we don't like to use too many trades with, but in my own team, I know it's somewhere where I need to address. And I think the ceiling that Tarpany has, I don't know if I can avoid it any longer. A Panthers game doesn't even concern me, because he's a forward. He can punch out 70 to 75 in his sleep. So Tarpany for me is almost looking like a must buy for any non-owners. I know he's not lowly owned anymore. He's not really even a pod, but I feel like he's just one of those guys who I kind of need to suck up and just try to get if I can. I know Nanai has performed really well over the last few weeks too. 709,000 though is really expensive, and a 5-round average of 97. I think he's got a 3-round average of about 110. He's got the draw on paper, but to me, I still prefer someone like Tarpany, who's a little bit cheaper, but I also just think is a lot more consistent. Like, you can see the numbers on the other side of them. A 54 base for Tarpany versus 38 for Nanai, which, to be fair, is a little bit higher than what it was at the beginning of the season. The thing is that I think Tarpany's got equal ceiling. Equal is maybe not fair. He's got a slightly lower ceiling, but I just know his floor is so much higher. So for me, I'm fine to go with Tarpany and to skip out on Nanai. But look, if you're a Tarpany owner already and you've got that luxury where, if you're doing like a Max King up to Nanai, via duels, I think it's really good. There's not too many other guys I'd sell him for though. I feel like it's one of those times where we'll probably get onto someone like Taylor May or Isaac Dongo, but I feel like selling Taylor May, it feels luxury because we probably have all these injury and suspension issues. But if you're in a position where you've got, say, more than 4 or 5 trades, and you've got the money from Cleary down to a cheapie, maybe like Tom Dearden, hypothetically, and that lets you go tailor-made to Nanai via duels, that's the kind of trade where I say, yep, that makes sense. I wouldn't be selling other guns for him though, like a Day Fafita. I know he's been underperforming, but Fafita on his day can also crack a ton. That's the kind of thing where I wouldn't say it's good to go for Nanai, but if you're trying to upgrade some of those guys who have got a tougher run home, try to chase that ceiling with a Nanai, I think it's an okay move. Similar thinking as well with like a Cam Murray. I know a few people probably can do like a Taylor May to Cam Murray via duels. I think it's a good trade in as well. I think he'll do well this week. He's played 80 minutes the last 2 weeks and he's punched out like over 75, I think, in both weeks. So again, he's a very safe option, very cheap as well. 587k is a really nice price for Cam Murray. So I do think he's a very good trade in target as well for your second row forward. Like personally for me, I'm looking at front row forward, which is why I'm looking at Tarpany. But look, if you're a Tarpany owner already, and let's say, for example, if you don't want to have that inconsistency potentially with Nanai, I think Murray, he's not very highly owned either, because don't forget, he was very low owned coming out of Origin period. And yes, he's been heavily bought, but I still think he's going to be relatively a pod. So I think I think Murray is still a really good purchase. I probably would lean Murray over Nanai, but that's also because I do like the safety net that he provides. But look, Nanai, you can't argue with that ceiling, but I would rank Tarpany, Murray, Nanai as in my order of 1 to 3. So spoke about it in the previous section, but selling Taylor May or Isaac Thungo, personally for me, I'm not going to be selling either of these two, mainly just because of a trade situation. I've only got 3 trades left, and while these guys are fit and they're still playing for a good Panthers team, I just can't justify selling them when I know I've got the likes of, I've got a Nick Meaney injured in my center wing, I've got a Max King who's fine to get me 50, but I know I can get someone like a Tarpany. I've got Cleary to deal with. There's so many other things in my team that I think I need to address that, to me personally, it feels like a luxury to sell them. And I think if you're in that position of 4 or 5 plus trades, I'd say fine to sell them, because looking at that draw coming up, it's really only the Warriors matchup that I think you can comfortably play them. Without Cleary and without Luai, you can't see them being as explosive as an option as what they have been earlier in the season. And I probably would sell Taylor May over Isaac Thongo. I've normally been an advocate of holding and playing Taylor May over Isaac, but just watching the last couple of weeks, Isaac is a bit of a ball hog. I probably should have noticed this earlier in the season, but he really deprives the ball of Taylor May, and he takes more runs himself, I feel like, in attack, and so he's more likely to get those line breaks and tackle breaks. And so I think he's probably who I'd actually hold. He's got a slightly higher base, and that's probably due, in fact, to the because he's a bit more of a ball hog and it takes more runs. And someone's made a good point that I can't remember who, unfortunately, but it was a good point that they mentioned, was that Brian To'o returning probably has reduced Taylor May's output just a little bit, because when To'o wasn't in the team, Taylor May was taking extra runs and hit-ups. With To'o back in the team, that kind of takes away from Taylor May's workload. So look, I think he's fine. He's not someone who I think I would categorize in my top 4 center wings now for the run home, just given what's happened with the Panthers. But for me personally, I do think it is a luxury, but I know a few people probably are looking at doing Taylor May, maybe for like an Adam Dewey, maybe Taylor May to Cam Murray via duels. I think those trades are fine, but I would only advocate it if you're in a 4+ trade situation, because it still does feel like a luxury move. Now, I thought I'd do something a little bit different, because I don't know if I'll be able to do a lockout stream this week, just work's very busy. So I thought I'd try to address some more specific Twitter questions just in the actual video itself. So I'll quickly just run through them here. So the first one's from Tay Tweets, who said, he's got 1 trade left. Do I use it to replace Cleary or do I hold it? Taylor, I'm pretty sure you're doing quite well overall rankings wise. I would strongly suggest, if you have only got 1 trade left and if you've got suitable cover for Cleary, let's say Hines is your second halfback, I would be saving that trade, because I think 1 trade left is really, really risky. I think when we're only in round 21, we've still got 4 or 5 rounds left to go. And I think having that one, if you have no trades, any other injury, you can't deal with it at all. If you've got that ability to just bench Cleary and you can cover your 17 fine, I'd probably advocate for holding it. And that's kind of my general advice as well for guys who are running really, really low on trades. The second question came from Pikey_14, which was Nico to halfback and then pick up a fullback, i.e. Teddy, Latrell or Manu, and this was in the context of selling Cleary. So yes, I agree. I mentioned it before. I think I'd be looking for a fullback if you've got Hines if you can switch Hines to halfback. I did mention Latrell probably as a better buy for the run home. I'm probably getting a little bit more short-term thinking with that just because he's got the Warriors this week. I think Teddy can still do decent against the Broncos, but I do think Latrell and Teddy's draws are not that great now from this point onwards, and so I'd probably just take Latrell over the next couple of weeks. I think the goal kicking is probably going to help him out just a little bit more. Now, I haven't really spoken about Joey Manu. He's up to 880k, and I think he's got like a 16 break even, so he's really, really going to skyrocket in price. Look, I think I'd actually prefer Manu over Tedesco. The way that Manu was getting involved last week, he was taking so many runs. He just breaks tackles for fun. Oh, there's a little rhyme for all of you out there. So that's a really tough one. I think I would lean between Latrell or Manu actually as your trade in. I still think I'd go Latrell because I do think Latrell's like a really good captaincy option this week too against the Warriors. And then next week against Parramatta, I think it's a team that he can score well against. I think Parramatta without Moses, they're going to struggle a little bit in my opinion, and they do concede a lot of points to fullbacks. So my gut is telling me to go with Latrell, Manu number 2, and then Teddy number 3. The next question is from Bluffmaster29, which says Cleary to Munster is one trade. Now his second option was May to Dewey or Thungo to Murray as a head-to-head player. Now, because you're a head-to-head player, I think going with pods is probably more important. And I do also think chasing upside feels more important too. I feel like this week, Dewey's probably got higher upside than someone like Cam Murray, given that he's versing the Knights. And I do think that Taylor May is a better trade out than Isaac Thungo. So that makes me lean towards doing the Taylor May to Dewey move, in my opinion. I've realized I've repeated that question twice, so I'll skip the second one. The next one is from SE Matrix here, who says, do you think the injury to Jackson Hastings hurts or improved the great Adam Dewey? Now, I kind of mentioned it earlier. I don't know how easy it is to say without Hastings, how's that going to affect Dewey? All I'll say, as I mentioned it before, is that Dewey was performing well last year, even in an underperforming team. So I think it probably hurts him a little bit because it was probably good to have a nice foil in Hastings who can kind of control the middle. He can also be involved in fifth tackle options. It doesn't always have to go through Dewey. But I think Dewey he's a great player. He's come back from his ACL really good as well. So I think, let's say if you're asking that question in the context of you're not sure whether or not to buy him because Hastings is injured, I would feel confident enough in buying him this week, despite Hastings not being there. The matchup is also great for this week. Second last question was from Josh Camilleri 93. He says, should I go from Brayley to Cook, leaving one trade? Now, I'm going to assume this is Blake Brayley. He didn't specify which Brayley, but I'm going to assume it's Blake Brayley. If you've only left with one trade after this move, Cook has been really good, and I think he probably will be the best averaging hooker for the run home, just with Grant not quite hitting his straps since coming back from Origin. But I wouldn't do this particular trade. Main reason is that Brayley overall over the season has been fine. He's been pretty solid. Sharks also have a really good run home, as we showed earlier. So I do think that the hooker spot, I don't know how much of an upgrade you're going to get there. And I feel like having two trades left where you can kind of maybe make more impactful moves, say in your center wing or fullbacks, versus say the hooker where I feel like there's less upside to chase there. And Brayley's got a good draw home. Could be a nice pod as well. So I'd probably lean to actually just holding him. And the final question came from Johnzy_THFC. So he had 3 different options of trade. So I thought we'll try cover it because people might have similar thoughts here. So his first option was Cleary to Munster, Cooler to Drinkwater, Cleary to Drinkwater, Day Fifita to Murray. Now I'm going to rule out that second option just because I don't advocate trading out Day Fifita. It just feels a bit sideways in this position. And then the last one was Cleary to Dearden, Cooler to Latrell. So you're going with Latrell and Dearden here. I think I'd still personally go with the first option, going Munster and Drinkwater, because I think collectively Munster and Drinkwater I think will outscore both Dearden and Latrell. So I would lean the Munster and Drinkwater option there, Johnsy. So we'll quickly look at round 21 of captaincy. A few interesting matchups here that we can probably take a look at. The first vice captaincy option is probably the Roosters. Now, I've only written Tedesco here, but I probably should have included Joey Manu because I do actually think Joey Manu probably would be a better vice-captain against the Broncos than Tedesco. Just him on the eye test, the way that he's getting himself involved, I think he's just got a higher floor because he just does those very SuperCoach-friendly, crabby runs where he just breaks tackles. So I probably would say Manu is a better vice-captain than Tedesco, but I'm actually personally looking at a vice-captain on Munster this week. I just think the Titans at home at Amy Park, Munster's still been scoring well despite the Storm being a bit average, and he probably is going to be goal kicking this week unless someone write in the comments below if I've gotten that wrong, but I feel like he would be goal kicking this week. So I feel like he's got that potential for a big 110, 120 point score. And if you're someone who's obviously benching a lot of guys because you've got low trades and little depth, and you've got an easier chance of doing the vice captain, someone like Munster getting 110, you could very easily do a loophole on that. So I don't even mind going a captaincy on Munster, but I do feel more confident, or more comfortable I should say, going with a vice captain on him first, just because I think someone like a Hines later in the week is a nice safe captain option who's got the Dragons at home. Look, the Dragons may bounce back because they've done this the last couple of weeks where they've had a down game and then they've bounced back. The thing is though that the Sharks look pretty impressive, and I think if we just have a look at that table just below my head there, if you look at St. George, they can see the most points to halfbacks out of any other team in terms of Supercoach points. So I look at that, I look at someone like Hines, who's got about 70-something points last week without doing too much. Like, he's just the ultimate accumulator, as we say. So for me, Hines feel like a really nice, safe captain who can at least get you like 80 points, if not 100, 110 plus, which is why I think Munster's probably got a maybe better ceiling than someone like Manu or Tedesco this week, because the Broncos are still a pretty good matchup. So I think Munster VC and the captain Hines is kind of where I'm leaning at the moment. If you want to go a little bit different, someone like Latrell could also be a nice vice-captain option against the Warriors at home. Only thing that detracts from me wanting to captain Latrell, if you own him, is just the fact that he does have low base, and he can sometimes have those dips in games where he just doesn't score so well. Like last week against the Sharks, I think he scored around the 50s, and that included a try that was basically gifted to him. Look, Sharks are obviously a much tougher matchup than the Warriors, but just that lack of involvement at times can make me a little bit scared of captaining Latrell. And if you're looking for a real pod play this week, it probably would be Adam Dewey. I've spoken about him quite a bit. Newcastle at home seems like a great fixture. So I think if you've got if you've got the reserve set up to do like a vice captain Hines, captain Dewey, I don't mind it, but I feel it does feel very, very upside chasing, very poddy, that might be exactly what you're after. But I think the nice safe option this week is probably going to be Nicho Hines captain. Sorry guys, I was going to show my team, but just with my setup, it's made it a little bit difficult, but I'll quickly just give an insight as to what I'm thinking, but I'll definitely try to post on Twitter as well my updated thoughts. I've got 3 trades left. Nick Meaney's not playing this week, but I've got enough depth to cover him. So what I'm thinking of this week is I could feasibly hold trades. I've got enough of a decent 17 where I don't need to make the trades, but I kind of spoke about it earlier. I was very keen on someone like Joe Tarpany. So one trade scenario I am looking at the moment is Nathan Cleary down to like a Tom Dearden, one of those cheaper halfbacks. And then I would use that money to upgrade someone like a Max King to Joe Tarpany. That would leave me with one trade though, which is very, very concerning. So I'm partly thinking, do I need to do the move this week? Maybe I can give it a week and rest. Just save the trades, try to keep it in the bank for later. Just trust in my 17. But that's the initial trades I was thinking of, was doing Cleary for Dearden and maybe trying to get Tarpany. But I'd be keen to see what your thoughts are as well. And yeah, at the moment, I'm pretty set on a vice captain Munster and a captain Hines. Going to end the video there. Apologies I wasn't able to go through everyone's questions in detail. Obviously reach out to me on Twitter as well if you've got any further questions. I'll try my best to do a lockout stream, but I'm just not as sure if I can do it this week just with work being so busy, but hopefully you all understand and appreciate. And if you did like the video as well, obviously give it a thumbs up. Just it really does help out me and the channel and the old YouTube algorithm. Enough of my rambling. I'll see you all in the next one.